Welcome, folks, to the first ever Kevin Rush Show, brought to you by Taco Casa of Forney. Coach, I appreciate you coming out and committing to do this every week. We're going to do a coach's show every week for the folks out there, and we'll also play this on the SportsGram broadcast during the broadcast on Friday night for our away game. So hopefully the fans will get to know a little bit more about Jackrabbit football. And as I warned you, I'm actually going to ask you a personal question at least once a week and let people know the man behind the myth of Coach Rush. Is that going to work for you?
That'll be fine.
All right, sounds good. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So, unfortunately, I think we need to start at a place that maybe is not a real comfortable or a real pleasant thought for you, and that's kind of the end of last year. So, Jackrabbits made it back to the playoffs, went up to Allen in that fabulous new stadium and played Prosper. And I'm sure you remember this way more than anybody else, but you had the lead going into halftime. It was a 7-6 lead at halftime. Second half didn't go the way you would want it to. So, what do you? As you went throughout the spring and the summer, what did you remember about that game, and particularly that second half?
Well, the kids had played extremely hard, and we put ourselves in a position where we could win the game. But just as always, there's a few calls that can determine a lot of times what happens, the outcome of the game at the end and everything. And we put ourselves in a position that we had to depend upon a call that didn't go our way. And anytime that happens, what you of course focus on is making sure that we don't let someone else control our destiny, and
right.
make sure that we have control of our destiny in that situation.
So when you look back, not just at the playoff game from last year, but the entire season, what do you take away? I mean, it was a successful season. Maybe you might not have met every goal that you had before the season started, but what do you take away from last year as a whole?
Well, our kids were resilient in the fact that they just maintained the same competitiveness. When you're sitting there 1-4 going into the last 5 games of the season, and a lot of teams would have packed it up and went home and said, "Hey, let's call it a season, Coach. We're done fighting." And instead, we went in with a goal in the senior class with several of those guys went in with the same goal of, "Hey, only thing we have to do is go 4-1, and we're in the playoffs.
Right.
And if we go 5-0 in that, we might even move up a position and play
get a better opponent."
Exactly.
Right.
Get someone of a lesser opponent or something. So I mean, that's what we were fighting for, and our kids stuck with it and hung with the coaches, and we believed in them and they believed in us, and they got it done.
Well, it was certainly fun to be a part of that ride broadcasting last year. And, of course, SportsGram will be back this year. I can't believe it. This will be our 8th year broadcasting Jackrabbit football on the SportsGram network, so we are very excited about that.
Amen.
That's probably enough for the past. So this is really a preview show for the 2013 season. And, school started today, and the first game is Friday. So kind of break down as you look forward to the next 11 weeks, right, 10 weeks, and you've got a bye week in there. What do you expect to see in the 2013 season?
Well, we did have quite a few returners, but at the same time we lost a lot of good seniors, a lot of good senior leadership, and now some of those seniors this year that were juniors last year that learned some of those skills from those upperclassmen, they're of course now stepping forward and they're having to take over the reins of the team and everything. And so far they've done a pretty good job. I mean. We've had less kids late than probably the two-a-days that I can ever remember. Kids were on time. Kids were picking up other athletes and stuff, and you can see some of the tight-knit groups. The offensive line. That's where it all starts, in my opinion. When your offensive line is together, it seems like it just unifies a whole group of guys, and our offensive line is real close, and our linebacker core and our secondary are trying to mesh together and everything now, and I think it's been a real good spring, real good two-a-days for us, and the start of school kind of helps us out because now they get to spend even more time together. They're eating together at lunch, and we're going to be, we start our meetings now. We're going to watch film during lunch and stuff, and you're going to see all the kids even growing tighter and tighter as the season progresses now with the school start.
A lot of people, when they talk about this district, they start with West Mesquite and Poteet and Highland Park. Forney is generally in that discussion. But what do you expect to see from those more familiar teams? And I think Terrell may have a little bit more than what most people expect over the last couple of years, or more than what they've seen. So tell me who you think the real top dogs are in the district and what you expect to see from them.
Well, I agree with you on the Terrell. They had a great freshman class. Whether or not they're going to be able to mature quick enough, because it's hard for a sophomore to step up and be out there with generally a lot of kids are 2 years older than them, and but they showed a lot of maturity last year with those same freshmen, and I know that they had a good spring and everything. Well, in Highland Park, Poteet, and West Mesquite, right now those three schools are very talented teams. Highland Park, of course, has a little bit more offensive line than the other two. I would say really probably though. I would have to give the nod to Poteet. They've got great skilled kids right now, and they've got a good offensive line that has pretty good size, and of course now they're going to have new head coach there with Randy leaving and everything, and that's going. It's going to be interesting to see how they mesh together.
Yeah, Randy Jackson had a heck of a program there for a couple years, a really good run several years ago to the state championship game, and just seemed like he was always having those Pirates ready to play.
He did, and now he's going to go be over at Plano East, thank goodness. And I don't have to go up against him anymore. But Randy does a great job, but those kids, I'm going to tell you, Poteet, that's one thing that since we've been in the district, we were basically even with them until the last, I guess, 2 years, and they've kind of pulled ahead of us by 2 games, I think, overall. But Poteet, they're very similar to our kids. There's a good mixture of kids that they have and that we have. West Mesquite, we've always been very competitive against them. They always seem to lack offensive linemen. They've got great skilled kids at every position.
A lot of when you think West Mesquite, you think speed.
Yes,
at every skill position. Their quarterback can run a 4.40, and he outruns some of their receivers. Yeah. He's just the one kid with the arm, but then all those receivers, they got speed, they got height. Just athleticism all over the place.
And they've spread it out defensively also with the linebacker core and their secondary core. They're just outstanding. But in Highland Park, they've got the linemen. And they've got a lot of great skilled kids that work hard, and they're so efficient. You've got to let them make mistakes, but they don't make very many. And when they do make mistakes, you got to capitalize on them quickly. Yeah. The rest of the district, everybody's got a little bit of something that they do well. Mm-hmm. Newman Smith has always been a great defensive team. That they're very physical and everything that we're going to play well against. Creekview has got some great offensive talent, and their quarterback is rated nationally, in the top 5 quarterbacks in the nation coming out this year.
That'll be a test for your secondary, to say the least.
Exactly, and then the young man could run extremely well too. So that's another one. And then of course North Forney, they've got the young athlete that's already committed to A&M and everything, and they even had to move in. One of his cousins moved in from Oakland, and he scored 3 touchdowns. I heard this past weekend in their scrimmage on throwing the football, and so they're North Forney's got some good balance in offensive linemen, defensive linemen, and skilled kids also.
Well, I'm sure everybody's got that game circled on the calendar.
Oh, yes.
And probably be that way every year. They no reason to think it would be otherwise. Kind of like Poteet and West Mesquite. They circle each other on their calendar the day the schedules are released. So look forward to that for the second game between the 2 Forney high schools. That ought to be interesting. So, Coach, you mentioned a couple times some of the players that you've lost from last year to this year, and we'll get to the players in a little bit, but I think a lot of the fans out there need to understand that you've had a lot of turnover in another very important area this year, and that's your coaching staff. You've had a couple of guys that retired that you personally had spent many years with, but also brought a tremendous amount of experience to the staff. And of course, it's natural. Some guys move on to other jobs and this and that and the other. But talk to the fans for a little bit about the turnover that you've had and what that really means to you and this year's coaching staff.
Well, we lost Scott Cluess and Tommy Mankins. Both of them combined had 75 years of coaching experience in the high school ranks. And Coach Cluess, of course, had some years in college also with soccer, believe it or not. And he was just a fantastic coach. Both of them are great coaches. 2 of the greatest coaches I've ever been around. They're great with kids. They know how to get the most out of kids, and that's what a coach's number one objective is. Sometimes it's, everybody wants to put the W's and the L's on it, but our goal as coaches is a lot of times to get more out of the kids than what anybody else could, or make sure that they push themselves and learn that they can push themselves. And those 2 gentlemen did a great job for us. I replaced them with Kyle Abshire, and I brought in Jimmy Schmidt also to replace the offensive line position with Coach Mankins. And those two guys now have a combination of 18 years of experience.
So about a third, you've lost about 2/3 of your coaching
Oh,
experience
yeah.
between two guys.
Yeah, between two guys. Now, both of them are great coaches, though. You know, Jimmy started here, of course, at our middle school and everything, and has done a good job of learning the offense throughout the years and also the defense. And he could really coach either way, either side of the ball, and he's done a great job. Kyle Abshire, you know, played back in the 90s for me here, and he was a defensive tackle for us and everything. Went on to play at Bethany, you know, College up in Kansas. And but Kyle's got a lot of experience. He's gone to Commerce, and he was at Sulphur Springs also during that time period as one of the defensive line coach. But he's been the defense coordinator his last 3 jobs. And you know, I know what kind of a man and what kind of qualities he has as far as work ethic and how he feels about kids. You know, he loves his kids, and he's going to coach them, and he's going to coach them hard, and he's going to get a lot out of them. So, you know, it's something I always look for in my coaches. I mean, I don't want a guy that's about him if he wants to win, you know. But I want a guy that's about the kids and coaching the kids to the best of their abilities. And I added a guy by the name of Zach Najarro, who, if you know anything about the past history of Forney, he was a 3-year starter for us at middle linebacker. Played also the guard position for us for 3 years, and he was a tremendous ball player, and he's been out coaching for, I guess, the last 6 years. So even with 3 coaches, I'm not even at halfway point with the experience that I lost. But, you know, I brought in guys that, you know, once again, they're good quality guys and that I know will have great work ethic with our kids.
Well, you know, it says a little something about your age, Coach, if you now got guys on your staff that you used to coach when they were in high school.
Well, yeah, I mean, but of course I'm coaching a bunch of kids that, you know, that I coach their daddies, and some of them at Garland, some of them, you know, some of them here, of course, at Forney High School now.
Can't ever get away from it.
No,
I love
no,
it.
no.
I absolutely love it. So you mentioned Tommy Mankins, and I knew Tommy a whole lot better than I knew Coach Cluess. So give us your best Tommy Mankins story. Now, remember, this is a family show, so you got to keep it PG. But I mean, Tommy's a walking just bunch of stories in and of itself. But what's your fondest memory of Tommy?
Well, you know, and of course, if a majority of the people know that Coach Mankins is my uncle. He was my dad's brother. And,
okay, I never knew that.
Yeah, and Tommy and I've known Tommy since birth. I can actually say that.
So I need to bring Tommy on the show later and get his favorite Kevin Rush story.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can give you my favorite story. When I was I guess I was about 6, and Tommy has always been a coach, and he's about 8 years older than myself. So I was 6 years old, and there, you know, I went up to visit my grandmother, and he of course was still at the house and everything, and he took me out there, and we were tossing the football and stuff, and there was another neighborhood kid next door to us, and Tommy got him over there, and he decided we're going to play Oklahoma drill. So he'd toss that kid the football and make me tackle him, and I was bawling and squalling and everything, and he'd just make me keep on tackling him and tackling him. I was 6, and that kid was probably about 9.
Right, because for people that don't know what the Oklahoma drill is, there is no running away from anybody. That is head on, and I mean the biggest man wins, right?
Yeah,
There's no Olay or anything on the side.
Yeah, and that old kid, well, you know, he was blistering me pretty good, you know, and then of course he'd say, okay, now it's your turn, Kevin, to carry the football, and that kid would lay me out, and I was crying still and bawling and squalling, and Tommy said, quit that crying, don't you know, get your butt up and start, you know, quit that crying. And of course, you know, I got him in trouble later on that time, so you know, my grandmother always was a little bit partial.
What goes around comes around.
Exactly, and I got even with them many times over, and you know, but like I said, Tommy, I used to bum. He had a great Montego, brand new Montego, and I just got my license and everything, and I was 16, and you know, Mom and Dad had that old, you know, station wagon that, you know, wasn't very attractive to go on dates with, but that Montego was pretty sharp, and he'd let me use the Montego every once in a while to take out girls, so it was always a trade-off there.
I hope Mrs. Rush isn't listening to this,
Oh,
unless she was one of those girls that you took on a date.
No, she wasn't, but Tommy, of course, has told the story many times. If you don't know Tommy, which he'll tell you stories now, over and
we may have to do a special Tommy Mankins edition of
true.
the Kevin Rush Show. That sounds really good.